Hi, Startup 260. I'm Professor Jensen, and today we're going to be talking about Simon CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. So let's jump right in. What we want to do is we want to create something that takes us from our HTML version, which we see here, which is just basic structural representation of all our different views of our application. And we want to convert it to actually have some style that makes it look actually pretty awesome. And it's pretty incredible that you can take it from something as bare bones as this to something as beautiful as this, just by adding a few simple CSS commands in here. So you can get an overview of what we actually changed in our transformation from pure HTML structure to CSS by looking at the home page, where we actually have this nice header in here and a nice footer. And then we have a content area with our text centered. And if we actually resize that window, and I can do that by going into the debugging tools and going here to show actually what it looks like as you move the thing around, or even as you change it from just a simple responsive design display here to actually be like on a phone, what this would actually look like on a phone. So these are really good things to learn in the debugging tools to actually see what it looks like responsively. And so that you know that it's working on all the target devices that you're going for. So if I go to the play page from here, I can see my game is actually centered. I've got some nice shadowing going on behind my game. I've got my WebSocket data and my database data coming in and being displayed here with different colors. And that will, as we add more WebSocket information coming on, that'll just flow behind the back of the game so it doesn't interfere with play. On the scores page, I go from a very ugly display of table without any representation to a table that actually has coloration to it, and the columns are defined by different colors. And then finally, the About page puts my image that I'm pulling in from my third-party image generator to be resizable based upon however big the image is actually, or the display is actually being resized. And also that my quote shows up in the same way, that it actually resizes and is responsive to it. So we're looking for a couple things here with our CSS. One is to make it look good, and the second is that it's responsive to the actual device that we're actually running under. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the code. So I'm going to first go over here to where I have all my source code saved off, and I'm going to download the code from GitHub by doing a git clone. So I can do git clone and pull that in, and you can see I've already got the URL for that in there. Once again, you can go to the GitHub repository that's pointed to in the instruction and go to the repository, go to the main repository page, click on the code green button there, and that will give you this link. And then you just do git clone with that link on there, and that will bring all your code down. So I'm going to go ahead and change directory into the CSS Simon directory, and then I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code on this directory by just typing code period, which tells it I want to open up on the directory that I'm currently in. So now we're looking at the code, and this is all the changes that I made in order to transform from HTML to CSS. And I can actually use the live server extension to see what my code currently looks like by just opening up the index.html file and pushing on that button right there that launches the browser. And now you can see I'm not on my production server. I'm actually looking at port or host number IP address 127.0.0.1 on the port that the live server extensions is broadcasting on or networking on, which is 5500. And that matches my port over here, which it says that it's actually running there, 5500. So you can see it looks great. I've got all the functionality that I showed in my production box, and I can prove that it's actually, this CSS is doing this by just simply going here to my index.html page that I got with Simon and removing all my CSS references. So you can see I've got an external style sheet here going out to main.css, which is that file over here. Main.css, which we'll look at in a minute. But if I comment that out, and I also comment out my Bootstrap reference, which is the CSS framework library that I'm using to do like the header, footer, and the button rendering. If I comment those out and save it, and then toggle back over to my page, so once again, no magic going on here. I'm actually still on my development server, and you can see all my CSS is actually gone. And I can prove that it's still working because I didn't comment out like the play page. It still looks good. But the main index page, which is my login page, is totally lost all of its CSS. And I'm basically back to that same HTML that I had on my production server from my actual Simon HTML deliverable. So it truly is like rendering it. And I can do the same game here with, let's go do play too. So if I look at the play page right now, before I remove the CSS, go back over to my source code and go to play.html, and I comment out my CSS. On the play page, I've actually got two. I've got my main CSS, which has the header and footer kind of formatting in it. And then I've also got one specific to play, which has all the styling for the actual Simon game itself. So I comment out both of those. I'm actually kind of interested to see what happens if I don't comment out the bootstrap. So let's leave that one in there and come back over here, and you can see, yeah, I've got this really weird hybrid of like non-styled things and styled things, and they're kind of just dumping all over each other. So that's not good. So let's go ahead and get rid of the bootstrap one too. And I'll save that and come back here. And yeah, now I'm back to just very simple buttons and a reset and nothing very interesting going on here. So that demonstrates that the CSS does actually work. And you can play games with, disabling just portions of that to kind of experience what it's like when you actually go into, say, part of the CSS. So if I go over to like the play CSS in this case, which is doing all my, you can see my player name, coloration, the game backgrounds, positioning where all those things are, my containers. I can actually remove some of this and see how it actually works. So if I go back to my display in the browser, that looks like it's running really well. But if I come over here and I like just comment out the game, so I can just change the selector to be something that doesn't actually exist. And if I save that and toggle back over, you can see I've lost that styling that was actually doing. I've still got my buttons there. They're the wrong size and they're not in the right position because I dropped out my styling for the main game component. So you can see the impact there. You can also see things like the shadow. So right now, I've got this nice little shadow happening on the back end here. And if I come over here and just comment out this one, just by making an invalid property selector there, then you can see I actually lose my shadow. Now you can play the same game without actually manipulating the CSS declarations. So if I go to my browser and open up the debug tools, and then I go and just navigating here, or I can use the selector to actually navigate around on what elements are being used here. So I click on the game. You can see there's the game element and the button collector. And it's showing me the actual CSS as I'm debugging that's being applied to it. So that same border shadow there, I can actually disable that just by clicking this button here. And you can see that it's actually taking that shadow off from it. And I can do things like go to the button here. So we're on the green button here. And if I want to actually make that, say we wanted to make it a purple or a blue button, let's make it a purplish button. You can make it a purple button just by debugging and changing things directly within the browser's DevTools interface. So that's something you really want to get familiar with and know how it works. All those properties are there. You can see where they're coming from, whether it's coming from Bootstrap or from your own code. And you can also go all the way down here to the bottom and you can see actually for whatever element you're on. So if I go back over here to my game, scroll back down to the box model, it'll show you like all the dimensions and what the padding dimensions are, border, margin, whatever, in the whole. So all of those things are used to actually help you understand how to debug and figure out what's going on with your styling until you can just get it right. So I hope you have fun with that. So once you've actually implemented all that CSS, which I've done here, and I'll let you play around and look at the code to actually see how I did all of that, then you're ready to deploy. And this is going to be that same pattern that you did with HTML, with the Simon HTML. So you're going to come over to your console application. And if we do just a listing of the directory here, you can see I've still got that deploy file script. And this time we'll do it to CSS instead of HTML. And once that's done copying up there, we can come here and see that our green button, once we refresh the browser, turns into a purple button. So that demonstrates how to clone the code, how to look at the code within your Visual Studio Code, how to use that to change things around, use the live server extension to visualize what you're actually doing, and then using the browser's debug tools to actually play with it, change things, debug it, and then finally to use the deployment script to actually push your Simon up into your production environment. And then you use what you've learned there, go write stuff in your notes.md file, and also then go and update your production startup code so that it actually is utilizing all the stuff that you've learned about cascading style sheets. I hope you have fun with that. When you get CSS in there, that's when your application starts to look good and is really exciting to actually show off to other people. So make sure you get a lot of experience with that and get it looking basically like you want it to look like in your production environment. And then you'll be ready to add JavaScript to actually make it interactive. Have a great day.